Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shanti Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantirume Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. We begin today with chapter 5. It's titled as Karma Sannyasa Yoga, renunciation of action, the yoga of the renunciation of action. In some versions, it is titled as simply Sannyasa Yoga. This chapter, while it deals with many themes, its primary theme is what does renunciation or sannyasa truly imply? What is the real meaning of giving up or letting go? So the meaning of sannyasa becomes more clear and explicit in this chapter. So let's read the first verse together. Arjuna Uvacha Sannyasam Karmanam Krishna Punaryogam cha shamsasi Yachreya etayorekam Tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Arjuna said, O Krishna, you teach renunciation of actions and again action. Tell me decisively that one of the two which is good for me. This question is not very different from the question that Arjuna asked at the beginning of 3rd chapter. We know the context. They are on a battlefield, and after going there, Arjuna feels no, he's not going to fight. And then he doesn't feel quite all right with that decision either. Although in the beginning he seems quite confident that not fighting is a good idea. Later he begins to have second thoughts. After just Krishna, Prahasa Niva, Krishna kind of gives sometimes just a look or just a small expression on the face can be more powerful than a long lecture. So you see that Krishna basically just says, what a cowardly person you are, and just smiles. And Arjuna is understand that something is not quite right about his decision not to fight. Then he realizes, I'm really confused. I don't know what to do. And so that is the moment when Arjuna says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. And that is when Krishna's teaching in the Gita begins. And as we saw in the 2nd chapter, the first few verses are about the nature of the self. The second half of the 2nd chapter dealt with how to do work in a selfless way. So there were two things clearly. First is about the knowledge of who we are, the self, and second is about doing work selflessly. And Krishna seemed to be speaking highly about both these things. So Arjuna's doubt seemed quite common with the doubts that any of us can have. So you are speaking about the knowledge of the self as something everyone should strive for. And you're also saying, go and work selflessly. Now, those are mutually contradictory in some ways, because the knowledge of the self is really the knowledge that I'm not the doer. And go and work selflessly is you're still going and doing work. So if I'm not the doer, how can I do anything at all? So they do seem mutually contradictory. And so Arjuna's question at the beginning of 3rd chapter seemed reasonable. What am I supposed to do? And in chapters 3 and 4, we saw how Krishna then describes, much of last chapter that we studied was about rest and activity, how our lives get divided between action and rest, and how the ideal is to be intensely active and intensely calm at the same time. Krishna also points out in the earlier sections that we have studied that in order for us to become eligible for that knowledge of the Spirit, our hearts must be pure. Right now, of course, after reading this, I think many of us fairly understand that we're not just this body and mind, we are the Atman. So we cannot say we don't have knowledge of the Spirit. Of course, we have knowledge that I am the Atman. But that knowledge that we have has not made us enlightened yet. Why is it that in spite of knowing I am the Atman, I have not become enlightened? And the reason is, right now, that knowledge is only theoretical. Right now, that knowledge I can kind of understand intellectually. Yeah, this makes sense, this is logical, this is rational, but it has not become a part of my experience. Sri Ramakrishna describes this by pointing out the difference between having just heard about milk. So when you go to Wikipedia and see or read an entry on milk and see what its chemical constituents are, and you can read a lot about milk. And so you cannot say you don't have knowledge of milk. Clearly you have some knowledge. But that knowledge is different from the knowledge of milk you will have when you actually have a glass of milk in front of you. And you drink it, and then you feel wonderful after that. So that's also knowledge of milk, but knowledge that comes through direct experience. So right now, we all have knowledge of Atman, we have knowledge of Brahman, we all have knowledge of God. But that is simply reading about it in Wikipedia. So that the Wikipedia right now that we are studying is the Gita. So good, this is important. We need this kind of conceptual knowledge. But how to transform that conceptual knowledge into experiential knowledge? For instance, now all the windows are closed, and we might say, well, someone just comes in and says, it's raining outside. Now, we are not seeing the rain. We probably are not even hearing the rain. We have just heard about it. And we believe that person and say, oh yeah, it's raining outside. So you have knowledge that it's raining, but that knowledge will be complete and filled and become truly yours when you actually go and feel the water on your head, and then you say, yes, now I have no doubt whatsoever that it's raining. So that kind of knowledge of the self we have not had yet. And in order to get that kind of knowledge, our heart must become pure. In order for the heart to become pure, we need to work selflessly. So Karma Yoga produces purification of the heart. Purification of the heart gives us the clarity of vision, which then transforms the conceptual or intellectual knowledge of the self into knowledge that we truly live and experience. So the sequence seems pretty clear. First, learn to work selflessly. Purify your heart, make your mind pure, then you have knowledge of the self, then you are liberated. Clear. But then now, if you go to the last verse of chapter 4, that kind of muddies the water a little bit. What Krishna says in verse 42 in chapter 4 is, therefore, O descendant of Bharata, destroying this doubt born of ignorance of the self and seated in the heart with the sword of knowledge, take to yoga and arise. So now here he's saying, destroy that doubt about what you should do or doubt about who you are with the sword of knowledge. In other words, get knowledge. And then, then he says, then take to yoga. So here he's apparently seems to have switched the sequence. First get knowledge and then take to yoga. And so good reason why Arjuna should be confused. Has he really switched the sequence? No. It seems like that because when he says, destroying the doubt born of ignorance through the sword of knowledge, the knowledge here is really just the conceptual knowledge, indirect knowledge. As I said, right now, we cannot in complete honesty say that we are completely ignorant. Sure, we have knowledge. Because now we have this conceptual knowledge of the spirit and the body and mind being coverings over it. Because of that conceptual knowledge, we can now try to live according to it. We have not experienced it yet, but at least we know how we must live. So we need some amount of empirical knowledge, theoretical knowledge, in order for us to then do something about it and transform it into experience. So in reality, no sequence is changed. But because Arjuna latches onto that word knowledge, meaning highest knowledge, then he has this doubt, well, if it's highest knowledge, then why should I then, and how can I, and why should I do any work afterwards? And that is why he says, you teach both renunciation of action. It's not really teaching renunciation of action as much as teaching the knowledge of the self. And knowledge of the self means I'm not the doer. If you're not the doer, you cannot do any action. That is what is meant by renunciation of action. And again, action, because he says, now go and fight. So tell me, which one of these two is good? Which one of these two is something I should do? And now Krishna answers that question. Verse number 2. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sannyasah Karma Yogascha Nishreyasakara Vubhau Tayostu Karma Sannyasat Karma Yogo Vishishyate. The Blessed Lord said, renunciation and the performance of selfless action both lead to liberation. But of the two, the performance of selfless action is superior to the renunciation of action. So, Krishna now again addresses that same or a similar doubt about knowledge and action, jnana and karma. And he says that both of them, knowledge of the spirit or experiencing the spirit and working selflessly, both lead to that highest truth, both lead to enlightenment. But if you have to choose between the two, then doing action selflessly is better than renouncing action. Now, why does he say that? Well, why he say that only Krishna knows, really. We can speculate. One reason is that giving up of action is possible to do without purification of the heart. And that's a problem. Let me put it this way. Giving up karma is not something that needs to be done in as much as it is something that happens. In other words, we don't have to create this dichotomy in the heart. Should I now strive for the knowledge of the spirit, or should I do work selflessly? Should I practice karma yoga, or should I try to acquire the knowledge of the spirit? This conflict need not exist in our heart. Let's just work selflessly. That's what Krishna is saying. And when we work selflessly, when our heart becomes pure, that time we don't then have to say, oh, now my heart seems to have become pure, so what's the point in now work anymore? Since the work is supposed to make my heart pure, and my heart is pure already, so now should I stop working or should I continue? That shouldn't be a problem. We should just keep on working. When the heart becomes pure, we don't have to give up work. The work will give us up. And we see that in Ramakrishna's life. He was a priest in a Divine Mother's temple, and as a priest he had duties. He had to go do morning worship, lots of responsibilities. He had to pluck flowers, he had to do a lot of things. And we know from his biography that he was an intense seeker of God. So a stage was reached in his life when he says that I couldn't do any work. Not because of he was physically incapacitated, but he describes it this way. He said that one morning when he goes to pluck flowers in the garden, he has this mystical vision that the entire universe is a big altar of the divine. And he says then, so where am I taking these flowers? So only when you have the distinction between an altar being in one place, a garden being there, then you pluck flowers from there and then put it on the altar. Now if you're seeing the entire universe as one big altar of the divine, then you are no longer able to do it. One other day, he says he goes to pluck the bilva leaves, which are sacred to for Shiva worship and are often used in puja. So he says as soon as he tried to pluck the leaf from the plant, he felt as if you are trying to mutilate a limb of a living entity. And he says he wasn't able to do it because he saw the plant was living. So he says from that day onward, he was not able to do puja. So I mentioned this to show that Ramakrishna didn't have to deal with, should I now give up doing puja? That was not a problem at all. He wanted to do all his work, but the puja gave him up. That's how I like to see it. So when our heart becomes so pure, then we will become incapable of doing work. Now, this also statement needs a little bit of clarification. It wasn't like then Ramakrishna never did any work all his life. So there were moments when he's in this superconscious state called samadhi, when he's seeing everything is just filled with the divine. Of course, no work is possible then. But then when his mind would come down on this plane of consciousness, he did a lot of work. Same is true, not just with Ramakrishna, all these great ones. When they were in this highest state, the state of absorption into the divine, they were incapable of doing work. But then when they came down to our plane, they did a lot more work than any of us can do. So that is what Krishna is pointing out here. So he says, doing work is superior to not doing work, because if we stop doing work just because it is a higher state, before our heart has become pure, then not only will we not realize God, we will actually start going in the opposite direction. And so not a good idea. A second reason we might guess why Krishna is praising doing work selflessly is because that's what Arjuna needs to be doing right now. There is a figure of speech in Vedanta text. It's often called Arthavada. Arthavada means praise. Praise not in order to misguide someone, but in order to encourage someone to do it. So literally here, if you pluck it out of the context, it wouldn't make too much sense. Why is this greater than that? So one way is to say, well, first of all, this is what Krishna says is the right thing for Arjuna to do. It's like sometimes when say mother wants a baby to do something, then one way of making the child do is to show how wonderful that thing is. I remember when I was a child, to encourage me to eat bitter melon, I was made to think, oh, if you take bitter melon, your blood will become pure. It's this blah, blah, blah. You find like all the qualities, if you eat bitter melon, everything in life you will get virtually. Now, the idea was to really encourage the child to eat it. And so this is a little bit like that. So Krishna, first of all, wants Arjuna to work selflessly. And then, as I said, one other reason is that giving up work before we have the necessary purification of heart won't help. And so the simple rule for most of us is, don't try to give up work anytime. When the right time comes, work will give you up. So just keep working. Oftentimes, most of us, we don't have any choice. We have to keep working anyway. Well, where we have a choice is not that we work or not work, but how we do that work. If I can do that work as an act of worship, if I can do that work remembering the spiritual ideal, then that work, instead of binding me, will in fact free me. Verse 3. Jneyasa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. He who neither dislikes nor desires should be known as a perpetual renouncer of action. For, O mighty armed one who is free from the dual throng is easily freed from bondage. So Krishna now is explaining to Arjuna why he feels that Karma Yoga is better or superior than giving up work. And it's very beautiful. Jneyasa nitya sannyasi. If you simply give up work, then you become a sannyasi. Giving up of work, well, you're giving up something. But you can be a nitya. You can be, the word given here is, translation is perpetual. That means you can be a sannyasin for all time if you give up these two things. Give up all attachment to likes and dislikes. So don't have, you remember, I've said this before, that we all have likes and dislikes. The ultimate goal is to rise above all our likes and dislikes. But a first step, interim step, is at least give up strong likes and strong dislikes. That could be something which is not too difficult to do. So hold on to your likes and dislikes for a while if you can't give them up immediately. But at least intense dislike and intense like, try to kind of dilute them a little bit. So, and then gradually try to rise above likes and dislikes. And that's what he means here. Yona dveshti na kankshati. Again, desires. Same principle. We all have desires, hundreds of them. Try to give up these. Okay, well, as I have said before, if it's possible, just make a list of the major desires you have. And it's your own private list. You don't have to show it to anybody. And then ask yourself one by one, how intense is my desire for each of these items in this list? If you want, just put them in a priority. What is it that you want most? Number 2, number 3. It doesn't have to be a very perfect list, but at least you'll have some idea, some clarity of what are the things that you seek in life. And then you will see from your own experience, the shorter your list is, the happier you will be. The more freedom you will experience within, the more peaceful you will be. So, if it is possible to strike out a few things from that list, do so. And over time, keep on looking at that list again and again. Sometimes with age, with circumstances, with different situations, our list may vary. Sometimes it may become big, sometimes it might become small. But the overall goal is to keep on minimizing it. And what Krishna points out here is, when these likes and dislikes, when I'm able to rise above them, one way of understanding rising above likes and dislikes is that neither of these will evoke a reaction in me which I'm not able to control. It's like something wonderful happens, something you like that happens, and sometimes people are just so thrilled beyond themselves, they just start jumping and yelling. Or if something terrible happens, something you hate happens, and you are either terribly angry or terribly upset, both of these intense reactions of intense joy and intense sorrow, both are hurdles in maintaining our inner equilibrium, calm, peace, and freedom. Both take away our freedom. So, one way of understanding rising above likes and dislikes is to see that, can I have all of my reactions in life under my control? Sure, it's great to be happy, but can even my happiness be under my control? Because the trick is this. We might say, if I'm happy, why should I try to control my happiness? Just tell me how to control my sorrow. Happiness I'm not interested in controlling. The problem is, the controlling mechanism is same. There is no separate controlling mechanism for happiness and a separate one for pain. So, if I'm not able to control my happiness, I will not be able to control my pain. That's the reality. So we need control. That doesn't prevent us from being happy. That doesn't stop us from experiencing sorrow, but we have the situation under control. That is one way of understanding of rising above likes and dislikes. Also, sometimes you just look at life, we will see our likes and dislikes. Some of the likes and dislikes may remain constant, but many of them are very changing. There are some things you love when you are a kid. When you grow up a little bit, the things which you like, they don't fascinate you anymore. Then your list of likes changes, your list of dislikes changes also. So just recognize that our likes and dislikes, by and large, is a very dynamic list. Some of these things may last a little longer than others, but by the very nature, seeing that these things are constantly changing, we don't need to hold on too tightly to any of them. So what Krishna is saying is, if we are able to rise above or beyond our likes and dislikes, if we can minimize our desires, then we're already sannyasins. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that there are two kinds of yogis. The word that he used in Bengali was Gupta yogi and Vyakta yogi. Yogi and sannyasi is used more or less in the same way, used in the same sense. So, if we are seekers of truth, if we look upon ourselves as spiritual seekers, then we all have to give up. Giving up or renouncing is primarily an internal act. So giving up is not about anything external at all. Really, giving up means giving up my attachment to the ego, giving up my strong likes, strong dislikes, giving up my desires. So this is all completely internal. And so if I have to be a spiritual seeker, I may not be able to achieve this overnight, but at least that should be my effort. That this ego, this sense of I and mine, which is the source of all pain and sorrow and bondage in my life, can I reduce its hold upon my soul? Am I able to stand apart from this sense of I? Can I know that I am different from it? Can I let go of it in some way? So that is inner giving up. And that is what Ramakrishna meant by Gupta yogi. It's completely inner. No one else will know. It's like this. What thoughts are going on in your mind, no one will know, unless those thoughts also, sometimes when there are strong emotions within our heart, then they don't simply remain hidden. I mean, how do you know a person is happy? You know a person is happy, well, most commonly just it shows itself in a very cheerful appearance, it shows itself in a smile or a laughter. So the body manifests outwardly the inner emotion. That's how we know. If a person is miserable, we wouldn't know unless somehow that it reflected in the appearance or the body language of that person. But if we have our emotions under control, then it's possible to be happy or miserable without any external indication of it. So even a person sitting next to you wouldn't know what's going on in you. Exactly in the same way, how much hold your ego has upon you, or how much you have been able to distance yourself from it, or how much you are able to see yourself as a child of God, only you know, no one else knows. And that's why it's invisible, so it's called Gupta yogi. Now, some among the spiritual seekers may, in their life, their inner aspirations and struggles and hopes might manifest outwardly. And oftentimes it may take the form of some external visible vocation that one chooses. For instance, monastics, those who become monks and nuns. So when you choose a monastic vocation, then you have a monastic robes, you take vows, and so it's very visible. So just by looking at the robes that a person is wearing, by looking at where the person is located in a monastery, in a convent, just by that, it's kind of almost like everyone knows from outside, oh, this is what this person is, this is the vocation this person has chosen. Now, both those who have chosen to a life of sannyasa, chosen that vocation, are spiritual seekers, but that does not mean that those who are living outside a monastery or a convent, those who have not chosen a monastic life, are somehow less of spiritual seekers or not spiritual seekers. That's not true. What is important, what is common among all spiritual seekers, monastic or not, sannyasi or not, is this inner giving up of the ego, inner giving up of the worldly material goals. We may not succeed in it fully, but that's our goal. That's what we are striving, making an effort. So inner renunciation is common to all spiritual seekers. The outer one may occur in some, may not occur in others. Not necessarily an indication that in those whom it occurs externally are somehow greater than those in whom it doesn't occur. There's one very interesting passage in the Gospel of Ramakrishna where M, the recorder of the Gospel, Mahendranath Gupta, he asks Sri Ramakrishna, he says, what is it that determines that some person will join a monastery and some won't? And what many would have expected is, well, those who have greater renunciation will join the monastery or will devote themselves entirely to God or pursuit of the goal of God realization. And those whose renunciation is not that great may still be devotees but may not join the monastery. That would have seemed to be the answer that many would have expected. But that's not at all what Sri Ramakrishna says. So the question was, what is it that determines who joins a monastery and who doesn't? And Sri Ramakrishna's answer is, that is the will of God. It's very, very important. What it means is that what vocation we choose, we might sometimes be led to believe that it is entirely our choice. It may not be. So just because someone is not visibly a seeker of God, in the sense that no one has taken a visible vow of renunciation, does not mean that that person is any less of a seeker than one who has taken. The contrary, the opposite is also true. Just because someone has taken a vow of monasticism or joined a monastery does not automatically mean that this person has greater renunciation than others. So that is distinction that we must keep in mind. So there is a distinction and yet no distinction. So what Krishna points out in this verse is that if we are able to rise above our likes and dislikes, if we are able to minimize our desires, then we can be sannyasins. All of us can be sannyasins in the real sense of the term. And such a person who is free from the dual throng is really likes, dislikes. I desire this, I hate this, I love this, I don't like this. All this duality, the polarities, if I can be free from them, such a person is easily freed from bondage. So that is the goal Krishna wants Arjuna to strive for. And through Arjuna, he wants all of us to strive for as well. Verse 4. Sankhya Yogau Prithak Balaha Pravadanti na Panditaha Ekamapyasthita Samyak Ubhayor Vindate Phalam. The ignorant say that knowledge and selfless action are different, but not the wise. Practicing thoroughly even one, a person attains to the fruit of both. The fruit of selfless action, the fruit of knowledge is same, enlightenment. So the two are not really different. So practicing any one, you will attain to the same, attain both in the sense you get the goal that both point to. What this really means is this, that if you practice selfless action, it purifies your heart, gives you clarity, makes you fit for the knowledge, you become free. If you practice knowledge, obviously that knowledge cannot be practiced unless your heart has become pure, then it will make you free. So the idea is this: you can only compare things which are equal. If things are not equal, it's like what we might say, just as an example, like oranges and apples. You cannot compare oranges and apples because they are two different things. You cannot compare, we might say, well, something like, which is better? Let's say, to pursue a PhD or just get a degree, which is, you can't really compare them because you cannot go for a PhD unless you have your basic undergrad degree. Unless you have a degree, you can't even go for the higher course. So the relation here between knowledge and selfless action is that unless you do selfless action and become pure, you cannot really practice knowledge. So comparison between the two is not possible because they really don't belong to the same category. One comes after the other. That's the idea. The same idea continues. He describes it further in verse 5. Yat sankhyayi prapyate sthanam tad yogairapi gamyate ekam sankhyaṃ ca yogam ca yap pashyati sapashyati. That status which is attained by men of knowledge is also attained by men of action. He sees truly who sees the way of knowledge and that of action as one. They are one because they take us to that one goal of enlightenment. So Krishna says, don't have this doubt about knowledge and work as two different processes and that you have to choose only one of the two. At present, you really don't have choice. What Krishna is, I just wish Krishna had just told him directly right now that right now you're just not, he has mentioned it, but I think Arjuna is not getting it still, that right now you're not fit for knowledge, just do what I tell you to do. I think Krishna obviously has a lot of patience. I think some other teacher would have said, just go and fight, just do it because I tell you to do it, no questions. But Krishna has patience. He encouraged questions from Arjuna. And since we are studying this Krishna's teaching, I would also like to encourage questions from all of you. So, since we are all Arjunas, I'm not Krishna, but we are Arjuna. So let's think about it. So what do you think? What questions come to your mind as a result of what we have seen today or what you have seen previously? Yeah, Rajan?
Why this confusion? I mean, if the seeking the knowledge is the higher plane, why he brings this at all?
Why he brings what?
Why there is a confusion? I mean, I would say selfless action is the only way to reach. For most of us, unless you are going to be a very different person, why this even dual? Why he has to bring these 2 points at all?
No, I think there is some justification for this. It's like this, because in the beginning, Krishna begins with saying the self is beginningless, endless, birthless, deathless. And now they say, well, and that is who I am. So if I am birthless and deathless, then what am I doing here on this battlefield? Why should I go and fight? What duty do I have if I'm birthless and deathless? I don't have any duty. So you see, there is a room for question here, because if Krishna had not mentioned anything about the Atman and just said, just go and kill, but I don't think that would have been effective, because in the beginning, the first chapter, Arjuna already is pretty settled views. No, war is bad, and I think we all agree with him. None of us, neither does Krishna say anywhere that, oh, war is great, just go and fight, you'll enjoy it. That's not the idea. I mean, Krishna is not advocating violence or war. So, if Krishna had simply said that just go and fight, Arjuna may not have listened. You see, it's actually, you will see later on, and many of you have read the Gita before, it's only in chapter 11 where Krishna gives Arjuna that cosmic vision, and suddenly Arjuna discovers he's this infinite being there, and then later on then he just falls at his feet, and Krishna is saying, Arjuna is telling him, oh, please forgive me, all these days I thought in our terms, they both were at the same age. They were just friends, they were cousins. And so when Arjuna sees that, he says, all these days I thought you were just my friend, so please forgive me. So whatever I may have said to you, I never knew you were such an infinite being. But that's going to come later. So right now, if Krishna had simply told him, just go, I think Arjuna would have continued to argue. And then all the thousands of soldiers on either side would have just gotten irritated. So just finish the argument and get on with the war, they may have said. So, so that's why sometimes it's difficult to find the connection. When Arjuna is saying, what shall I do? I'm confused. And Krishna begins by saying, this is the nature of the Atman. But as we proceed, then we begin to see why he began with speaking about the self. Yeah.
Swamiji, you said liking and disliking. You have to be above liking and disliking.
No, come closer. Yeah.
You said that prior to this discussion that we have to be above liking and disliking. But a spiritual seeker, this is very important. Discrimination comes. There is something we do not like. That's why we are looking something we like. And we may not know that, but if we are coming above that, that really, as a spiritual seeker, we cannot discriminate what is like and dislike, and what is spiritual life has benefit. Well, we have to be liking and disliking inbuilt.
Inbuilt?
It is inside. It is we're born with that, or we have the power, liking and disliking. That's how we make our choices.
Right, correct. I understand that. So when he is referring here as likes and dislikes, that doesn't mean, oh, I like the spiritual ideal. So do I have to rise above my like to a spiritual ideal also? Is that what you mean?
I mean, to go to deep in spiritual life, I have to like that.
Correct, yes. So you don't have to, the thing is this, because I like spiritual ideal, that is why I need to make an effort to rise above likes and dislikes. Yeah. So, I'm not very clear what this thing. Okay, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
So maybe I understand that if a speaker likes, dislike, it's mostly level of reactions, unconscious, and when we speak about spiritual ideal, it's more question of values, principles. So it's like. So here is the difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we can ask ourselves, yes, I like the spiritual ideal. Why do I like the spiritual ideal? And if we say, well, because that's true or that makes sense. So similarly, we can examine our other likes and dislikes also and say, why do I like this? And sometimes we might see that if we keep on examining our likes and dislikes, our list might change. That is the thing. Sometimes unexamined likes and dislikes that are problematic. I think it was Socrates who said, an unexamined life is not worth living. And someone then brought a corollary to that. And unlived life is not worth examining also. Yeah, you want to say? Yeah.
Can we be attached to enlightenment? In other words, what if you have a very strong like for truth and God and enlightenment?
Well, I think that's good. That's nice.
So that like is encouraged?
Yeah, it's like this. See, when we say give up desires, no, but desire for truth is also a desire, right? So then you say, well, should I give up my desire for truth then? Or rise above likes and dislikes. Well, I like spiritual life. Should I go even beyond that? Now, it's a good, very, very good question. What it means is this. It's not because we have anything personal against desires or likes themselves. The reason we say rise above likes and dislikes is because likes and dislikes hold me down on this plane which robs me of my freedom, peace, and fulfillment. Now, my liking the spiritual life or my desire for spiritual life, if it doesn't increase my peace, if it doesn't increase my pain and bondage, then why should I give it up? So it's not just like a blanket rule, rise above all likes and dislikes, give up all desires. It's not like that. It's like give these up because these are increasing my bondage. So you examine my desire for spiritual life. Is it increasing my bondage? Not, because the reason I am seeking spiritual life is because I want to be free from bondage. So that desire is not only not increasing my bondage, it is that desire which will in fact remove my bondage. Put it in other words, one way of rising above all likes and dislikes or rising above all desires is you like God or like the spiritual ideal so much that there is no place in your mind to like anything else. Or you desire that highest ideal so much that there is no place in the heart to desire anything else. So then it's not a problem. Swami Vivekananda's one quote, which is my very favorite, is this. He says, let's see if I remember it correctly. This is what he says. Live for an ideal, and that one ideal alone. Let it be so great, let it be so strong that there may be nothing else left in the mind. No time for anything else, no place for anything else. I might have gotten a few words, but that's the. It's a wonderful. I remember years ago when I was a teenager, in one notebook I was writing down all these quotes from Swami Vivekananda's works which I liked, and this one was among them. And so some of them, because I've read them so often, they kind of have stuck in the mind. It's a great idea. If you're consumed with some ideal or goal, and everything else goes away from the mind, you will make, even not just in spiritual life, even in scientific world. You know about Aristotle. When he was in the tub, his mind was there, continuously thinking about the law of immersed bodies and flotation and all of that. How much of this is historical we don't know. He just got up and eureka, I just started running. But even great scientific breakthroughs have occurred when your mind is so focused on something to the exclusion of everything else. Prakash, yeah.
So you emphasize the importance of effort, the effort towards liberation, the efforts towards freeing us from bondage. But on the other hand, liberation seems to be something, so effort means you're somehow in the realm of cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
But liberation is something somehow beyond cause and effect.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So how is it that effort leads you to something which is beyond?
Well, it's like this. For instance, now let's say this room is dark. We don't have any lights. but there is a sun shining brightly outside. But all the windows are closed and the room is dark. Now, what do I have to do to get light? Well, I have to open the window or remove the blinds and the light comes in. Now, when I do that, I have not created light. The light was already there. But I needed to go and open the window in order for the light to come in. So that's what it means. So freedom, we are already free right now. But I need to open the window. So there is something needs to be done, but that doing doesn't produce light, it just removes the obstacle. And the obstacle here is ignorance. So removal of ignorance is something that needs to be done. And we might say, well, if everything that is done is not permanent, right? So if it is removed once, will it come back again? And the answer is this, that the effort to remove ignorance belongs to the same level as ignorance itself. In other words, my effort to remove the obstacle in spiritual life is as real as the obstacle, which means it's not so real. Because the only reality is Brahman. The only reality is the spirit. So everything other than that is only an appearance. So my effort to remove my ignorance is as much an appearance as the ignorance itself. So that's the idea. Yeah.
Swamiji, I was thinking about the sequence that is mentioned in the last couple of verses. So first we do selfless action, and then the heart becomes pure, and then we attain knowledge. But I'm thinking that in order to do selfless action, I need to have this realization first that I'm not this. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm more than that.
Correct.
So in my mind, it's going hand in hand. And then ultimately you will, like, if I do enough selfless work without any ultimate goal, but other than just to do good, I'm thinking that, I will have more knowledge than what I have now, but I still need to have some knowledge.
Correct.
That, I have
Yeah.
to renounce the action in order to be able to do the...
Perfect, that's exactly, you are perfectly right. So when Krishna says in the last verse, in the last chapter, with the sword of knowledge, cut this, remove this doubt, that sword of knowledge is really conceptual knowledge. Because if it's the enlightenment, then there is no question of then go and do this. There is no duty. We saw in, I think, the 3rd chapter, we say that an enlightened being has no duty whatsoever. So there is nothing that needs to be done by an enlightened person out of a sense of duty. So the sequence is this: you get a conceptual knowledge, then you try to put that conceptual knowledge into practice through karma yoga, through working selflessly. The more I succeed in working selflessly, the more it purifies my heart. The more my heart gets purified, what was conceptual knowledge in the beginning then becomes experiential knowledge. So we have knowledge in the beginning, indirect knowledge, purification of heart, then it becomes direct knowledge. So that's the idea. Yeah. Yeah.
From an evolutionary perspective, from a perspective of evolution, why were we born without this ability to act selflessly?
Why? How would you have created the world? It's a good question, but it's not a question that, first of all, how would I know? So, clearly, why were we born that way? But the answer itself may not be very helpful. In some ways, Vivekananda as a teenager once, where he said, looking at the nature of the world, as teenagers do, he said, I could have created a better world. So the world is not a perfect place. Well, the point is this: if it were perfect, then what are you seeking freedom from? If it were perfect, then we're just great right now. So it's not a perfect place. It's clearly we don't work selflessly. Our senses are continually going outward, and that's why you need to struggle to get enlightenment. Otherwise, everyone would be enlightened. So there is no why. That's just how it is. I mean, it's like asking, why is there only around 21% oxygen in the atmosphere? And so there's no why. That's just the way things are, right? So this is just the way things are. So, yeah, I don't have anything more to say. Jason, yeah.
Just to kind of revisit the dislikes and the likes, I think it's the wording of like rise above that is a little bit confusing, because like when I feel a like or dislike intensely, like it rises up and I can feel it, and it leads to all these secondary emotions that like they cause me to act, like to react to it, and it drives me into an action.
Mm-hmm.
And by rising above isn't saying that I can feel these, like I'll still feel a like or dislike, but I can be detached from it to the sense that it won't drive me into an action. I can feel it, and I won't be pulled to act from it.
Yep, but that's good. I like the way you put it. Should my actions be guided by my likes or dislikes? In other words, what happens is this: if I don't have my likes and dislikes under my control, my agenda for the day is not decided by me. It's decided by my likes and dislikes. It's like if I like, say there's some lot of sweets, and if I like sweets, and I don't have any control over it, I haven't risen above, or I don't have my likes under my control, then I will go and attack those sweets. I will eat them all at once, because what I do will be dictated by my likes. And that may not be in my best interest. Maybe my doctor has told me, avoid sweets, but my likes will force me to do it. So rising above, so that's what it really means, that my likes and dislikes should not dictate me. Because if I'm being dictated by my likes and dislikes, I've already lost my freedom. I'm no more a free person. That's the thing.
But desire still needs to exist in order to live. But the desire still exists, maybe a little bit farther away from me. That like I'm not driven to do it, but like I still need desire to live. Like
you need to. You
desire.
need.
Like I need to like desire things in order to live, in order to bring me places to eat. Like I need to have some desire to put food into my body.
No, I don't think you need desire in order to live. It's the other way around. It's not like, oh my God, I can give up my desire if I want, but I will die, so I'm keeping my desire. I don't think we have any choice about it. So I think it's other good to put it the other way. We live because there are desires. Not that I need desires in order to live, which kind of makes it feel like I have some choice there. I think we don't have a choice. We continue to live because the desires are the one which push us, which goad us on. That's the idea. Well, we'll think about it some more. So hold that thought, and maybe next Wednesday we can continue this, because this discussion will take us deeper into it, about the role of desires, the role of likes and dislikes in our life. So I would encourage you to give some thought to it in the week ahead. And then next Wednesday we will continue this discussion. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So we'll end with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.